children up to the age of 18. So you have a preventative measure, which is radioactive iodine can be prevented from uptaking in children if you give stable iodine. Stable iodine is available, but no orders were given. And the prefectures actually, gave orders on an ad hoc basis. So it's very well known, so I'm not going to spend time on it. So it was not done. Next. Now, this is a very big issue. What is the radiation safe dose? There's no dispute that over 100 millisievert, okay, if you don't know what 100 millisievert is, Vataru is an expert on this, but I will just tell you very simply. There are different types of radiation, beta, gamma, and they have their own unit of measure. But in order to have a universal measure, you have sievert, millisievert, which you don't have to say for beta radiation it's X, gamma it's X. You can have a universal unit of measure, which is millisievert. Now there is no dispute that over 100 millisievert there is risk of cancer. There is no dispute. What is now disputed by WHO, ICRP and the Japanese government, which rely on those expertise, is what is the effects of what is known as low dose ionizing radiation between 0 and 100. Okay? So there is an opinion, considerable opinion of scientific people that say it's minimal. There is another group of scientific people who say, and that's what I've listed there, Osaza, PR, Pierce, etc., who say that there is no threshold limit, and as you increase from 0 to 100, exponentially the risk of cancers grows. And this is even accepted by ICRP, which is the International Council of Radiation Protection. And these are studies done from, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Just a word, Chernobyl. The problem with Chernobyl scientific studies is that for 3 years there was a complete clampdown on information. And the studies which were carried out are supposed to be, according to a group of people, not scientific or validated. So though high morbidities of leukemia, etc., other disorders were found, they could not link them causally because the studies were not designed scientifically. You have to design them from the very beginning, and it has to be long term. But there are other studies which show that in fact there is a risk of cancers from 0 to 100. As it goes on, it increases. Now, there are two different opinions. What is the obligation of the government and what is my duty as a special rapporteur? Should I ignore this lot at this stage when we don't know? It may take not only 20, 30 years, 2 decades, maybe a generation, 2 generations. Can we just ignore these studies? My personal opinion and my objective opinion was I cannot ignore them. So we have to err on the side of caution. So this is one of the fulcrum of the report which there is disagreement on by the Japanese government. They are saying these, of course they don't relate to the studies at all, they relate only to the other body of studies, and they say these are the scientific studies and they ignore these. This is a dispute. So that's why you see a debate, and all this impacts on evacuation, etc. But unfortunately for the Japanese government, their own standards in terms of the law, etc., tells you that the law, for example, as it existed before Fukushima, requires that radiation dose does not exist over 1.3 millisieverts for those working in the areas. But if there are ordinary people, then they can't, like factories or nuclear plants. So people who are working there, they will be exposed to only 1.3 millisievert quarterly over the background radiation. Whenever we use these figures, we actually say over and above the background radiation. And the law in Chernobyl also said 1 millisievert. Now, the problem is that, and they have actually allowed, then we'll come to that later. Just go to the earlier slide, the one you had earlier, Susan. Yeah. No, the other one, the one before this. Yeah. So that's why I said, because of the law, because of Chernobyl, because of Nagasaki, you should consider according to your own law, according to your own notions of safety, and your long-term goal is 1 millisievert. You must actually use that as the measure. Of course, even 1 millisievert is not necessarily safe, but it's better than 20 or, and obviously government must provide. Now, what has happened is contrary to their own notions of what is safe. So, they are saying come back to zones which are just 20 millisievert or less. That's one. Then, most importantly, they came out with textbooks for children. And this is very alarming. And they said that there is no excess risk of cancer if radiation dose is less than 100 millisievert per year. So what are you teaching children? It's a very sad thing. And Japanese society is very, very sophisticated. So this is not to do with the sophistication, and I will come to this later why it's happening. And most unfortunately, in my opinion, and that this needs to be discussed, they relied on a letter from the International Council of Radiation Protection. Now this is an NGO, in the sense it's not a government, it's not a UN agency, it's a private organization, but UN agencies rely on this because of the esteem of the members, which is perfectly reasonable. But ICRP itself recognizes in their own documents that beyond 1 millisievert, there's a risk. But they say, well, when there's a nuclear disaster, 20 millisievert is safe. And what do they base it on? It's on the risk-benefit analysis, which I talked about earlier. Like your motor car, good pollution, it can cause morbidities and even deaths. But we accept that risk. But do you need to accept that risk in the context of areas of science where there is not that much information, clearly? And contrast it to the right to health framework approach, where each individual's rights has to be protected. And this becomes acutely important when you talk of participation of people. If the people are not involved in the decision making, I think it's not acceptable. So that's why my report is very different. Okay, now I will go through this very quickly. And basically it's based on the notion of what is safe. The Japanese government says 1 to 100 millisievert, no real risk. So if you go on that basis, all your health surveys are going to be based on that. Whereas if you stay even after 1, there's a problem, then your health management surveys, basic health surveys, all the surveys would actually be more extensive than what they have contemplated. So they have 5 surveys. One is the basic survey, and there are detailed surveys, children, comprehensive health survey, mental health and pregnancy and birth survey. In that, the questions now are very interesting. But I'm not going to go into detail, but just one, go back. The basic survey is very interesting. Just to give you an idea of how things are working. The accident occurred on the 11th of March. Not the accident, man-made disaster, let me put it. So after 3 months, there's a huge form which people are expected to fill. What were you doing between 11th of March and the 31st of March? To get an idea of how much radiation they were exposed to. They can calculate. And obviously the form is so complicated that only 20% response is there. So how will you actually, it's 23%. So it's not working. And Japanese society is very, very efficient in terms of getting responses from people. And if you don't have a high response rate on this crucial issue, there's a problem. I won't say anything more than that. So what is the way to, no, 1 minute, don't go. We are going too fast. You're faster than I am. No, that's not acceptable. Then there's a detailed survey of children. Now this is important. I already mentioned up to 18 thyroid cancer. This is supposed to be done every 2 years and every 5 years after the age of 20. Now, if you're saying there's only thyroid cancer, you won't look at other things. So, and this is really based on what I call the narrow appreciation of Chernobyl. Because if you think only thyroid cancer is a problem, you will only be doing that. Quickly next. People, now there are categories of what type of nodules and cysts come up. So there's A1, A2, B1, B2, and B2 is like risky immediate secondary examination. But people who are in B1, where there is nodules and cysts, they are not allowed to access medical records. So there is a grievance by the people. Again, this is decided without participation. Obviously, there will be a problem if you don't take people into confidence. So they can't access their own results when there's nodule and cyst found in their children. Mothers cannot access their medical reports. You have to go through a complex right to information procedure. Then there's the comprehensive health survey. Internal radiation is measured, but what is the affected people? Only 20 kilometers. The plume may have gone elsewhere. Then one of the data that we found from groups of people working, there were urine samples of people which showed strontium, which is a measure of internal radiation. You know, originally they said we don't want to do this. They said we will go for whole body counters because internal radiation is to be measured. But there's an issue about that. So secondary opinions, when parents wanted to find out from other doctors, they were given instructions, that is doctors, that they should not encourage secondary opinions, which actually creates another problem. So that's what I said in the report, that there's trust deficit in the people if you resort to this kind of measures. Obviously, when the plume goes out, the fallout is on the soil. All the plants, vegetables, animals that are affected, they have to be monitored. Then there's the mental health survey. Again, the zone is 20. Now, a huge problem because you know what people did? In the family, husbands would stay in the zone which is affected, and the mother would go out with the kids because they want to protect their children, which is very reasonable. Obviously, because of that, there are anxieties. People are losing jobs. A mother is losing a job, and the health